Have you ever reached the end of a really demanding season only to realize you were more exhausted than you thought? Have you ever wondered if what you're feeling wasn't simply because life had been hard, but because you've been carrying far more than you were meant to carry? When was the last time you paused to ask yourself, do I actually have the capacity for everything I'm carrying? That's something that God has gently been showing me these past few months. Hello, I'm Jen Stone Sexton, founder of Freedom to Flourish Ministries. Welcome to Flourish Moments with Jen. I am so grateful and excited that you're here. Honestly, I didn't expect one of my greatest lessons this year to come through an unexpected family season. But looking back, I can see that God wasn't just teaching me about rest. He was teaching me about boundaries. For years, I've taught about the importance of rest. I've taught women that we weren't created to live exhausted, overwhelmed, and constantly running on empty. But recently, God invited me to live that message in an entirely new way. The past couple of months brought some unexpected family circumstances that required much more of me than I had anticipated. My routines disappeared, my priorities shifted. There were long drives, difficult decisions, countless details, extended time away from home, and days when I felt like I was simply responding to whatever was most urgent. Can you relate to that at all? Like many women, I just kept showing up. I kept doing what needed to be done. Because sometimes that's what love requires. But once things settled down, I began reflecting and praying. As I processed my emotions, I found myself resisting the temptation to frame the season as, look how much I sacrificed. Instead, I kept asking, God, what are you teaching me? And little by little, He invited me to take an honest look at my own responses. Ouch. I know, right? And in doing so, I realized something that surprised me. The greatest lesson wasn't about how demanding the season had been. It was about my boundaries. I realized that my boundaries weren't strong enough to protect the peace, focus, and well-being I wanted to preserve. At first, that realization caught me off guard because I thought I still had boundaries in place. But the more I embraced the responsibility for my responses, instead of looking at the circumstances and the person involved, the more freeing it became. Because suddenly this wasn't something I had to resent, it was something I could grow in. Two different perspectives, two very different heart postures. And you know what? It was incredibly freeing. Sometimes we think burnout happens because life asks too much of us. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes burnout happens because we've never learned how to protect the rhythms that help us remain healthy. Rest does not happen accidentally, and neither do healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not walls that keep people out. I come across this over and over again in my coaching practice. The concept that boundaries are walls or that boundaries are to make other people do something. No, boundaries are not walls that keep people out, and we can't control what other people do. Boundaries are loving guardrails that help us remain faithful to the people and the calling that God has entrusted to us. Think about driving a windy mountain road where there's drop offs on both sides. There's guardrails there. Those are boundaries put in place to protect you as you travel and navigate the road. And God puts boundaries in place to protect us, to protect our peace, to protect our hearts, to protect our focus, our minds, our energy, our resources, our time, our talent, everything as we navigate life, as we navigate relationships. Boundaries are guardrails that help us remain faithful to the people and the calling that God has entrusted to us. I want you to hear this clearly. Healthy boundaries are not about loving people less. They're about stewarding our time, energy, peace, and calling wisely so that we can love well for the long haul. So, for every person listening, if you've ever loved deeply, perhaps you've discovered what I have. Love without healthy boundaries eventually becomes depletion, or worse, it can become abuse. But love with healthy boundaries becomes sustainable fruitfulness. Love with healthy boundaries becomes sustainable fruitfulness. And I don't know about you, but I want sustainable fruitfulness in my life, not depletion and exhaustion. Excuse me. One of the things I've been paying so much closer attention to lately is my capacity. It's like a new word in my vocabulary. It kind of had been there in the back of my mind, but now it's come front and center, like right in the center line of my focus, right in the radar. Capacity. Not just my schedule, my capacity. These days, I'm learning to ask questions like, do I have the emotional capacity for this today? The physical capacity, the mental capacity, because those are all forms of rest as well. And rest depletion comes in when we're not paying attention to capacity, when we're not restoring what's been depleted because we're ignoring capacity. I can't teach something I haven't lived. And asking questions like, does this bring life? Or is it quietly draining life from me? Does this person bring energy, or do they suck the life force out of me? I mean, paying attention to those things. And these have become surprisingly holy questions. The beautiful thing is, God doesn't shame us when we recognize places we need to grow. He gently invites us into greater freedom. Growth often looks like recognizing where we still have room to mature, not with guilt, but with grace. I like to say, no shame, no story. There doesn't need to be a story around it, a justification, excuse, or reason. It's just an area that I've observed. I need to grow in this. There's room for growth in this. I want to grow in this. And God invites us then to partner with him in that growth. Because living things are always growing. And one more thought before we close. Sometimes we pray for God to change our circumstances. Have you ever done that? I have many times. And sometimes He does. But more often, I found in my own life anyway, is that He lovingly uses our circumstances to change us. Change maybe our perspective, attitude, our heart posture, our focus, our level of maturity. Because if life were always easy breezy, I don't know that we grow so much. It's in the struggles. It's in the coming up against the hard things. Iron sharpens iron. Well, iron sharpening iron isn't pleasant. The refining process isn't pleasant. But it's those hard times where we get to choose how we respond. That's where the growth happens. Because God doesn't waste hard in our lives. He uses it. There's always a purpose. There's always a gift hidden underneath that difficult thing, that challenging person, that painful situation, whatever it is. And we don't go through life without them. Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble, tribulation, trials, difficulties. You will. He didn't say you might, you may, you could. He said you will, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. So, but God, when we look at the bigness of God compared to the smallness of us or our circumstances, it all fades into its proper perspective. Stand at the edge of the ocean, the vastness of it. Stand at the top of a mountain and look out for miles across other mountain peaks, the vastness of it. Look up at the up at the sky at night and look at the stars, and there are millions of stars in the sky. And the vastness of it. God is so big, and our circumstances pale in comparison to His bigness. And He can use all of that to change us and to grow us, to refine us, and to use us for His purposes, to bless others, to build His kingdom, to be a difference maker. Looking back, I'm grateful that this season didn't simply teach me how important rest is. I knew how important it was, and I got to practice it more. But what it taught me even more than how important rest is it taught me that healthy boundaries help protect the peace, the purpose, and the well-being that God is cultivating in our lives. And we have healthier relationships with other people when we have boundaries in place. God has boundaries with us. I hope that this is a lesson that I'll continue to carry long after the season has passed. And I hope that it's encouraged you as well. So if you've been feeling overwhelmed, constantly tired, or like you're carrying more than you were ever meant to carry, or than you have capacity for, perhaps the invitation isn't simply to get more rest. Perhaps it's also to ask, what boundaries would protect the life that God is inviting me to live? What boundaries would protect the life that God is inviting me to live? Sometimes one small boundary creates space for incredible peace. And sometimes the hardest part isn't knowing what to do next. Sometimes it's simply creating enough space to notice what God may already be whispering to your heart. So if today's conversation resonated with you, If you sense God inviting you to slow down and pay closer attention to what He's doing in your own life, I'd love to invite you to schedule a complimentary well-being consultation. It's simply a gentle space to pause, gain clarity, and explore practical next steps toward greater well-being in mind, body, and spirit. You can find my calendar for those complimentary sessions at flourishchristiancoach.com. Or if you prefer to begin on your own, you can download my free Flourish Reset designed to help you notice where you may be experiencing rest deficit and begin restoring what feels depleted. It's free at flourishchristiancoach.com. One more invitation before you go. I recently started sharing a more personal side of my journey in life called Flourish Strong. If you'd enjoy following along as I train, grow stronger, learn, and simply share life in real time toward a long held dream, I'd love to connect with you on Facebook or Instagram at Jen Stone Sexton. Until our next time together, remember, you were created to flourish.